There's been a lot of Dragon Ball wаnk lately, especially on Clown Battles Wiki, so in this video we will be refuting it. The main claim is that Dragon Ball timelines have two stacked dimensions of time. There are a few arguments I've seen people make. The first one is that timelines in Dragon Ball contain several spacetimes or universes within them, therefore they must have a second time axis. Except that's not how it works, as a single time axis can be shared across different spacetimes or separate dimensions, and they can simply not stack on top of that. That's why a multiverse doesn't automatically have two dimensions of time, despite it containing several different spacetimes. Similarly, just because time travel affects the 12 universes does not mean that the timeline has two different time axes, as once again, a single time axis can contain several different spacetimes, including those universes. Furthermore, any headcanon that Dragon Ball must have two dimensions of time is irrelevant when we are verbatim told by Whis that time only flows in a single direction, and any additional dimension is of course an additional direction. That means that Dragon Ball only has one temporal dimension of time. Even in the manga, Whis states that reversing time has an effect on the time axis, referring only to a singular time axis, not multiple time axes. So we have direct verbatim statements from the show. Next up we have the hyperbolic time chamber, which is also used to support such claims, as it's stated to have a different dimension of time, but that can just be in reference to it being a separate space-time or it having a slower flow of time, now that it's within a different temporal axis. And no, having a different flow of time does not prove that it's within a different time axis, as the flow of time varies depending on the location, even within a singular time axis. The next argument is that the room of time creates all of the past, present and future, which is used to claim that Universe 7 produces its own space-time, and all other universes do so as well. There are so many holes with this argument that we will have to take a look at them one at a time. The simplest hole in this argument is that Universe 7 does not produce its own space-time, as we are told that the universe was made by a god, not by some random room. The quote-unquote creation is simply in reference to it creating virtual realities of the past, present and future. It does not create temporal dimensions, or even spatial dimensions. We know this as we've already seen Kami's rooms create virtual realities using the past, present and future, and it was so illusionary. Now there is the argument that Popo says that Goku would go back in time, therefore it must be real time travel, whereas the other one is simply illusionary. The issue is that even with the illusionary time travel, it was still considered time travel by both the guides, the show, and the characters including Popo. So Popo saying that Goku will go back in time is not proof that it isn't illusionary time travel. One can even argue that they are the same exact room, considering the fact that Goku says that Goku trained there, and that the Zenshu mentions the Z Fighters training there when talking about the room of time. We can also see that the virtual reality Goku was sent in does not match actual reality. Virtual reality Motoito being stronger and faster than Kid Goku, despite the fact that the real Motoito got fotherized by a senile King Piccolo, whereas Kid Goku scales above Prime King Piccolo, who is described as being immensely more powerful. There is the fact that no change to the future has been made, and also the fact that if it was true time travel, characters wouldn't have even needed time machines and they wouldn't have been that big of a deal. So everything goes against this entire argument. Another keyword to this entire argument is that if the room of time produces the space-time, then by extension the universe is not producing its own space-time. The argument assumes that the room of time is part of the universe, and yet it also claims that it created the space-time for it, which is by definition what the universe is. So, does the room of time come from the universe, or does the universe come from it? The argument is so circular that it puts Pi to shame. If the room of time created the space-time, then by extension it's not part of the universe, and in turn it's not limited to only creating time for Universe 7. Therefore, from all we know, the room of time could be what produces time for the entire timeline. We've already seen Kami's walkout have portals that lead to other dimensions separate from the universe before, such as the hyperbolic time chamber, which is so separate that it's pretty much outside the macrocosm. This is because characters can sense things from the macrocosm, yet they cannot sense Ki from the hyperbolic time chamber because it's simply a separate thing. So in conclusion, the hyperbolic time chamber is not located within a different time axis. That's simply one of many interpretations of the statements. The room of time did not produce time for the universe, it only creates illusions, and they do not match actual reality. And a single time axis can contain multiple space-time continuums. Dragon Ball only contains a single time axis and a single flow of time. And now with all that talk about time, I also want to touch on Dragon Ball following the Type 3 multiverse quote-unquote. about. Now, I've already debunked this in the past. If you've seen my previous video, you would know that the trunk statement is out of context, as he isn't saying that every single action taken in the present or even the future creates a new timeline. He simply refers to time travel. When you go to the past and change history, then actions create new timelines. Not that every single action creates new timelines. We know this, as even Goasu basically says as much, and characters make a massive deal of new timelines being made, which would make no sense if every single action ever creates a new timeline. And of course, there is the fact that he's verbatim said that Dragon Ball has 5 to 6 timelines during the future Trunks arc, which also goes directly against that headcanon. It's quite crazy how every time a Dragon Ball fan makes a headcanon up, there is an official verbatim statement going against it. By the way, I've seen the argument that there are apparently infinite timelines because of how many walkers there were when Guasu was taking out the time rings. However, that assumes that all the walkers contain time rings. That's not the case. And we know that because when Beerus wanted to see all time rings to make sure they are not missing, Guasu only took a single box and Beerus was like, okay, no time rings are missing, all of them are here, I'm going off. A newer argument for Type 3 Multiverse Dragon Ball is some website where they invited some professor to talk about, that kind of stuff. But the issue is that nowhere in this entire article does it say that it applies to Dragon Ball. They're simply talking about our world, real life. And they've had similar interviews in the past where they talk about real life simply for the entertainment of the viewers, and it's never necessarily said that it applies to Dragon Ball. Even the way they describe time travel doesn't fit the show, so yeah. What we have in the show directly goes against the Type 3 Multiverse claim. But with all of that out of the way, now I'm gonna be ending this video and see you in the next one.